As we go along today, if you have any questions, feel free. You can enter them in your computer, and I will do my best to answer them towards the end of our satsang. This passage today from the Bhagavad Gita, last week we finished chapter 4, and we're beginning a new topic in a new chapter, chapter 5, which Swami Kriyanandaji in his book, The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, he calls this chapter Freedom Through Inner Renunciation. Chapter 5, stanzas 1 and 2. Arjuna said, O Krishna, you speak of renouncing action, yet at the same time you recommend it. I would like to know for certain, which of these two is the better path? The Blessed Lord answered, when rightly understood, both action and non-action lead to salvation. Of the two, however, right action is better. This stanza, in a way, explains the whole of the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, where the Kauravas and the Pandavas are fighting really for the right to rule the kingdom. And Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Kriyananda, Paramahansa Yogananda all explained that this whole Mahabharata is a spiritual allegory. It's all about humankind's fight for their soul, and that in the end one must act and one must fight. Arjuna, speaking for all devotees everywhere, he says, well, these are my kin. These are my qualities. This is my very self, who I know from growing up with it. My inner qualities, even my good qualities and my faults. And I cannot slay my own kin, my own self in a sense. And so Arjuna, this is the whole beginning of the Bhagavad Gita and how this whole extraordinary discourse from Lord Krishna begins. As Arjuna says, it is better for me to not fight and to not act. And so the Gita essentially comes back down to this subject that we're talking about again today. Whether one should pull away from all action and renounce all action. But the Lord says one is compelled to act. As long as you have a body, a mind, an ego, you are compelled to act. You cannot sit and perform inaction, because then even the mind is active. Even deep yogis in deep meditation, the energy is active. The life force is moving up the spine, and there is action even in that. And so the whole of the Gita is that one must act, one must fight, but it's all about right action. And it's sort of the fine print of what Krishna says here, and this is where it all comes down to our understanding. He said that right action, when rightly understood, is the way to divine freedom. And that part, when rightly understood, is sort of the breaking point, where I think most people in this world, they fall into delusion and suffering and misery because they don't rightly understand the way to act. And so Krishna beautifully in this chapter teaches us the way to right action. And it's not, as Swami Kriyanandaji has taught us many, many times, it is not through outer renunciation and renouncing outer actions. It's renouncing the attachment, the involvement of the ego, desires, and letting go of those things while continuing to act in this world. And it comes down to, in one way, whether one should become a monk or a householder. This is a question that I think many people comes to their mind when they get on the spiritual path. And they just, they are inspired by the lives of monks and saints that they see and holy men. And so they wonder, should I renounce the world and become a sadhu or a monk? Or in the West, there's the opportunity to join monasteries here in Christianity, for example. And so that is a question that comes to many people's minds. Now, it's not either or. One is not higher than the other. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda answers this question very directly. And very interestingly, it's in the chapter where he becomes a monk of the Swami order for the first time, and he's initiated into that sacred ancient order by his guru, Sri Yukteswarji. And he answers the question, which he asks himself, which is greater, one may ask, a Swami or a yogi? If and when final oneness with God is achieved, the distinctions of the various paths disappear. The Bhagavad Gita, however, points out that the methods of yoga are all-embracive. Its techniques are not meant only for certain types and temperaments, such as those few who incline toward the monastic path. Yoga requires no formal allegiance. Because the yogic science satisfies a universal need, it has a natural, universal applicability. A true yogi may remain dutifully in the world. There he is like butter on water, and not like the easily diluted milk of unchurned and undisciplined humanity. And then this one key sentence, which is somewhat controversial, and I say that because monastics of Yogananda's lineage later changed his own words to further and more support the monastic path as being the better one. And I'll get into this sort of a dispute that you hear between monastics and householders, and also my own experience of many years and what I've observed. To fulfill one's earthly responsibilities is indeed the higher path, provided the yogi, maintaining a mental uninvolvement with egotistical desires, plays his part as a willing instrument of God. I'll read that again. To fulfill one's earthly responsibilities is indeed the higher path, provided the yogi, maintaining a mental uninvolvement with egotistical desires, plays his part as a willing instrument of God. And again, he qualifies it, provided the yogi removes himself from egotistical desires. And that is really the key. It's not which one you do inwardly or outwardly. I've had the opportunity of many years of both being a monastic, living in a monastery, and also being a householder. When I came to Ananda Village in 1977, I was a brahmachari and a monk in our monastery for 7 years. Then I was a householder for about 25 years. And then about 4 years, God took my wife away and brought her home. And I have lived as a monk again for the last 4 years. But also during that time, I've gotten to observe and meet many monks from different orders and many householders. I've gotten to see that there are great and saintly souls among all of them. And I've seen also just the pitfalls of each path. And like I said about this passage from Autobiography of a Yogi, because it says that the householder path is indeed the higher path, provided one does withdraw egotistically from attachment. Certain monastics later changed the Guru's words to give more emphasis to the monastic path. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about how outer renunciation has its own pitfalls that are different from the householder path. And in fact, in the end, one must follow one's karma in a way, but one, no matter where they are given or no matter where they are placed in this life, they can practice and follow true inner renunciation. Swami Kriyanandaji has written books about this topic because it's so important. And I'll talk about 2 books that he's written completely and entirely about this subject that we're talking about today. So what I've observed, and Swamiji highlights this in one of his books, that the householder path, raising a family, can indeed, and in most of the world and most of the time, it pulls one into outer involvement, outer restlessness. One perhaps meditates less. One gets involved in the emotional entanglements of a spouse, raising a family, worldly duties, and giving priority and emphasis. And again, the feelings are caught up in that, and the feelings tend to go outward into that. And so there can be the danger of falling into that trap, which I've seen that even with very spiritual people. I have seen that. The higher side of the householder path is that it teaches one very, very important lessons on the spiritual path. It teaches one selflessness. A mother raising an infant, and the father too. It teaches them that they cannot think about their own needs at times, even if they have deep needs. They must think about the one they are raising. And so it expands one's own self-awareness and self-involvement to include others and embrace others. But of course, very often it stops there for many people. Swami Kriyanandaji decried this attitude of the family, the very insular family, holding on to just their own happiness and not sharing it with others and not expanding beyond it. He called it and described it as us four and no more, describing 2 parents and 2 children. And I think Yoganandaji also used that very same phrase. So this is the householder path, and the pluses and the minuses, depending again on one's own inner understanding, and again, when rightly understood. I've also had the very opportunity of being a monk in a monastery, spending a lot of time with many monks and meeting many monks over the years. And again, there's pluses and minuses of this path. You can become very self-involved if you don't follow it rightly, when it's not rightly understood. And I've seen this happen, where one is thinking of one's own liberation and freedom and not thinking of others, and one can become withdrawn from others' needs to the point where one can be thinking more about oneself rather than less. The other side of this is also that it can develop, again, when not rightly understood, it can develop spiritual pride. Swami Kriyanandaji, in his book on the New Renunciate Order, which is this book here, A Renunciate Order for the New Age, describes the Nayaswami order. He tells a story in there, and it is about the pride that comes. And you see this with some sadhus and swamis, that they develop this pride that they are better than householders because they've outwardly renounced the world, but they have definitely not inwardly renounced their ego. And so this is one of the pitfalls of even the monastic path. It can develop a certain sense of spiritual pride, that one is better than those who are involved with the world. And Swamiji tells the story, this is a story from India, of a sadhu, a very disciplined yogi who meditated long hours, renounced the world. And one day he was meditating, and a crow started cawing and disturbing his meditation. And with a great deal of anger, he looked at the crow, and the crow burnt into flames, turned into ash, and the ashes just fell down to earth. And the yogi was quite pleased and quite impressed with himself, with the powers that he had developed through many years of sadhana and austerity and meditation. And there was a lot of spiritual pride. He also had a lot of good karma, and that good karma attracted a devata, an angel, who came to him at that moment and said, "You are much too proud, O yogi. You need to overcome this pride, and I have someone who I want you to go to learn how to behave and how to be even more spiritual than you are." And the yogi understood that this was a blessing. And so this angel said, in this very, very town, there is a woman who is very saintly. And the yogi sort of was taken aback because he thought, a woman who is saintly. Again, his pride not only was his own austerity, but being a male, he was very proud in that way too. But this was an angel who was telling him, so he listened. And so the angel told him where to go to find this woman. And he went to this part of town, and he went to the town, and he went to the house that the angel told him to go to. And he felt, again, very proud. And he called inside to the woman and said, "I'm here, and I was sent here to have instruction with you." And the woman said, "I'm busy right now. You're going to have to wait. I'm serving my husband." And Yogi, again, his pride affected him. And he thought, a husband, how can she be spiritual if she has a husband? And obviously he was very proud and arrogant, but I have seen this in some sadhus and renunciates who have not yet renounced ego. And so he was starting to think impatiently, how can I learn? from both a woman and a householder. And this woman, very wisely, tuned into his thoughts and said very loudly, "Oh yogi, I am not your crow." And I think the yogi was very taken aback by this and understood that she must have a great deal of wisdom, and a great deal of power too, because his anger towards being sent to a woman and a householder, he wasn't able to turn her into flames with his anger. And so he waited patiently. Finally she came out, and she gave him a great deal of wisdom and understanding. And he took that wisdom and understanding home. The angel appeared to him again and said, "Yogi, great one, you still have a lot to learn. You still have some pride. You still have some arrogance. I have another teacher for you. Again, in the same town that you live in. Here is his address. Go to this man for learning." And so the yogi started following the address, and he found himself in the lowest part of the town, where there were leather workers and butchers, animals being slaughtered. He turned his nose up. He was a vegetarian and very proud of being holy and a vegetarian and all these things, as again, even many vegetarians can be very proud in that way. And he finally found the home. And again, he was taken aback because it was a very lowly home, such a vibration that he refused even to enter the home because he was too proud. So he called out, and there was a young man who answered, who was the man who he was being sent to. And the man said, "I am busy right now. I'm serving my parents." And so the yogi, by now he was starting to learn a little bit, and he waited. And finally this man came out of the home and gave him some very deep and profound spiritual instruction on serving others, on serving one's family, on serving greater society, on following one's own dharma of service and giving to others. And so the yogi understood that he had become very self-involved in his own little ego, very proud, and that even in his very act of renouncing the world, he was supporting his own ego, and he was embellishing his ego. And so, again, this whole concept of inner or outer renunciation is really a very subtle one and must be understood with deep wisdom. This is, again, why Swami Kriyanandaji has written 2 entire books on it. The other one, besides the one which I just showed you, is called Sadhu Beware, which is a new approach to renunciation. And this is not just for sadhus. This is for really anyone who wants to learn and practice inner renunciation. I recommend, sometimes people will ask me, because I have been teaching Kriya Yoga for many, many years and have been directing the Ananda Kriya Sangha for North and South America, which I will be doing shortly in India, when I move to India in just about 10 days. And I have often asked people who are practitioners of Kriya Yoga, they will ask me, what are the best books that a Kriya Yogi can read? And I recommend 3 books, and it's not a coincidence probably that all 3 of these books are right here among the books that I've shared with you. One is The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, which really is a whole treatise on the entirety of the spiritual path and how to avoid the pitfalls that Kriya Yogis, monastics, renunciates, householders, humans, in other words, can fall prey to. The other book is this book, Sadhu Beware. The third one is, of course, Autobiography of a Yogi. And Sadhu Beware, again, not just for sadhus, it teaches one how to be a practitioner of inner renunciation, no matter what one's place in life. It teaches one beautiful chapters in there. Swamiji has a way with words, of course, and he has a whole chapter on being what he calls an ego detective, meaning that you are a detective, you're a sleuth, seeking out the ways in which your own ego is getting caught in attachment and desire, in pride, because all these things are very subtle and they're very, very tricky. They're just almost designed to trick us from the inside, and so it affects even the ways in which we perceive reality. It's like there's an expression in America, people who are too cheerfully optimistic but not very realistic. It's said that they are wearing rose-colored glasses, and so everything that they see in the world is a beautiful rose color, even though it may not be. It's just they see it that way. And so the ego and the desires and the feelings of the heart have a way of even coloring our perception, and so that we perceive with a certain amount of judgment, perhaps, if we have a judgmental nature in our own desires and attachments towards family, friends, towards our own inclinations, color the world around us. So again, it actually affects the tools with which we perceive. And so this chapter is on how to overcome that, how to be an ego detective, how to catch yourself early on when you start to get caught and going down a particular mental road of pride, of judgment, of reaction, of bristling when your fine sensitivities are offended by someone who might be judged as being lower than you. And so especially for a Kriya Yogi, this is very important to not just think that one's sadhana is that time when one is practicing Kriya Yoga. One's sadhana is 24 hours a day, as Krishna talks about in the Gita here. It's through all of our actions which reflect to us all of our attachments and all of our desires, as this yogi experienced. I have had a wonderful experience the last several weeks. When I first came to Ananda Village, I arrived with all my belongings and possessions on my back. It was in my backpack. And over the years, again, I was a monk for many years, living simply, and then I became married and householder and got more possessions. And now, as I'm moving to India, I'm having to get rid of all of my possessions. Everything I own is being given away, sold, let go of. And I'm having to go through every little thing that I own and just let go of it. And it's a very good practice. Mentally, Swamiji has recommended this at night. Before you go to bed, he has said, as you're going to sleep, he said, mentally create a bonfire. And on this bonfire, throw out onto the fire all of your attachments, everything that you have a difficulty letting go of, and put that all on the fire. And he said it's a wonderful practice to develop this inner non-attachment. Now, very interestingly and humorously, there was a woman in our Ananda community here who told him that she was practicing this every night. And one of the things that she would throw onto the bonfire every night was her house, among other belongings and possessions. And she said that soon after she started doing this, her house burnt down in a fire. And she went to Swamiji and said, well, what am I doing wrong here? And Swamiji said, I told you to throw your attachments on the bonfire, not your house. Because, of course, our attachments are not the possessions that we have. We can own something and not be attached to it. And this is, again, this idea of inner renunciation, which again is taught in Sadhu Beware, which is to try to see our belongings as not really in the end belonging to us. We are just stewards. They belong to God. They've always belonged to God. We didn't create these things. They really are not ours. I had a beautiful, enlightening experience with this, where I helped to build the home that my wife and I were living in for many years. And there was a little bit of pride in that, of seeing this beautiful place and my part in doing it. And one day I was standing in my home, and I had created a nesting box for the woodpeckers, which is a type of a bird that lives in the area around Ananda. And in order to attract the woodpecker, they like to hollow out a tree and create their nest inside the hollow part of the tree. And in order to make them think that they've approached a hollowed out tree, you build a box and you fill the inside of the box with sawdust. Because if it's just empty, they come to this empty hole, and the male woodpecker especially likes to be involved with the process of creating this house for the spouse. And so I was watching the male woodpecker one day, and it came to this little house that I had built for the woodpeckers and filled with sawdust. And what it would do is it would stand at the hole of this box. It would pull out some of the sawdust. It would pound on the house to make a lot of noise. And then it would look very proudly at the female and say, look at this house that I've created for you and found for you. And I had to laugh because the woodpecker had nothing to do with the creation of that house. I had created that house for the woodpecker. And then I was standing in my own house, which I had proudly created, and I just had to laugh and see that I was being that woodpecker in relation to my own house. God had created all the materials, everything that we are. God created the energy with which I was able to even help to build this house. And so I saw that I was being as proud as that woodpecker over really doing absolutely nothing. And really, it was all something that God had done. And so when we act, this idea of inner renunciation really is all about our attitude towards it. It's not what we do. It's not about whether or not we build a house for our family or buy a house or whatever it takes. It has to do with our attitude and approach to it, and seeing it all as God's, seeing our body as belonging to God, seeing our service to others as belonging to the divine, even seeing our relationship, our service to our family and spouse as being our dharmic duty given to us by God to fulfill whatever karmas we have. And our part, very simply, is to see ourselves playing a role in a play or a movie that God has given us. And when we fulfill that role, not outwardly in the right way, but especially inwardly in the right way, with a sense of detachment, but not the type of detachment that makes us cold and impersonal. It makes true detachment, has divine love behind it, so that when we express to others, we can express qualities like kindness and divine love, charity, all these things. And again, you see this happen sometimes with people who follow the path of monasticism, is that they can tend to become very impersonal to the point of being unfeeling and even unkind. There's an expression that is common in India. It's also very common over the years at Ananda village, that all is Ram, all is Ram, all is God. And it's often said when going through difficulties and tests and challenges. And Swami Kriyanandaji has pointed out that for some, especially those who kind of pull away in an impersonal way, that it's very easy when seeing somebody else's suffering to say, all is Ram, all is Ram. But when someone goes through their own suffering, they say, ouch, this hurts, rather than all is Ram. And this again is this tendency sometimes of self-involvement that you see with purely the monastic path. Now, I'm going to mention that there is some higher qualities of the monastic path also, which is that it's not for everyone, but for those who are able to. Paramahansa Yoganandaji was very strong. He said if you come onto the spiritual path and you're able to have the freedom to follow the path of outer renunciation, it gives you the opportunity to spend more time meditating, doing sadhana. But he said it can only be rightly done when you also see it as an opportunity to serve others and to serve even at the feet of householders, rather than seeing them as people who are maybe lesser than you. You really have the opportunity to serve them because they also are children of the divine, children of the infinite, made in God's image. And really, one almost has the duty to serve others when one has that outer renunciation and does not have a family to support. In a way, one has a larger family to support in different ways, not financially, perhaps spiritually in certain ways. But this really is the highest way of outer renunciation. And this is why Swami Kriyanandaji, why he started this new monastic order, which he called the Nayaswami order, because he said it was time for a positive form of renunciation, not a renunciation that is world negating, but one is that he put it is samadhi affirming. And the way that one affirms samadhi affirming is that you expand your own tendency to be self-involved by serving others, by seeing God in others, and it starts to expand your consciousness. And samadhi is the most expansive state that one can be in, because the ego is finally dissolved. And the greatest way to dissolve the ego is to serve others, to give to others, and to expand your own sensibilities and your own heart's nature and your own concept of family to include the whole world. And this is the story of the crow and the sadhu, is really just this idea that spiritual pride comes, and so you start contracting and thinking only of yourself, and yet the way out is greater service rather than lesser service, seeing God in all rather than negating God in all. And this is the idea of the Nayaswami order, which is a subject all unto itself, which I won't get into today. Now, Sri Yukteswarji, Paramahansa Yogananda's guru, he put it very wryly. And when he was talking about monastics and renunciates and their obligation to serve, he said that because there's a tendency, and I've seen this with monastics east and west, that one of the other sort of pitfalls is this tendency towards inaction and seeing inaction as the way to freedom. And when one practices inaction, then what happens? One can start to become lazy and dull and all these things. Paramahansa Yogananda told an interesting story. He said that in Autobiography of a Yogi, you remember, those of you who know the book very well, he left his guru, Sri Yukteswarji, and left his guru's ashram. He was getting weary of the hermitage responsibilities, and he wanted to live a holy life that didn't involve mundane duties. And so he went to the Himalaya to find God. And he spent some time up there, but he said later, not in the Autobiography of a Yogi, but to Swami Kriyananda and others, he said that when he got up to the Himalayas, all he found were sadhus arguing over blankets and food and being very lazy because they could not meditate all the time. They didn't have the spiritual development to do that. And so a real sadhu, a real saint, you will find that the great ones serve mankind. They don't hold it just for themselves. Even when they gain that spiritual depth where they could meditate on their own all day long and still find that fulfilling and expansive, even then they share it with others. And the way Sri Yukteswarji put it, he said that those who are too good for this world are adorning some other. He said, as long as you're breathing the free air of this world, you have the obligation to render grateful service. And that means to God, to all. And that is the way of true renunciation. It's not renouncing outer action, but renouncing the motives for outer action and seeing all your service, whether it's as a householder to your family, as a monastic or outer renunciate to all of mankind. It is to give to all with that sense that you are giving to God and serving God, and you're not doing this for your own ego motives, for your own attachments, for your own gain in any way. And this is the way of true inner renunciation. So we have a couple of questions that have been asked. If you have any more, feel free to continue to ask. The first one here: what are some practical ways to avoid the pitfalls of either the monastic or householder path? Swamiji, in this book, A Renunciate Order for the New Age, gives some very, very good tips on this. And it's just, he actually addresses both of them with a list of points, actually, where he talks about the different ways that one can avoid the pitfalls. And I guess the greatest one is just introspection and watching yourself, watching your motives, watching your actions. When you do act, watch the motive that you are acting with. And I think it's also just the understanding for monastics especially, that the greatest pitfall is self-involvement, and the way out is service. And this means service to those who might not appear to be as, quote, spiritual or holy as oneself. And I think it's to see God in all. And that is very humbling to see that. I think it's also to pray to God and the Guru. Give me the opportunities to grow and to understand. Just like this sage who had the experience with the crow and the Devata coming to him and guiding him. If you are sincere and your heart is pure to a point, and you pray to God and the Guru, guide me on this path of life, even though your guidance may be unpleasant at times, but please don't let me go astray. Don't let me start to make mistakes. And if I ever, and whenever, I start to err and go off in the wrong direction, guide me. And this guidance won't typically come in the form of the voice of God telling you that you're making a mistake. It will come through your own experiences in life. It will come through your own suffering or tests or challenges. And so try, as someone who is sincere, who has given one's life to God, if you really have given your life to God, you will find that everything that comes to you is coming from God and the Guru. And I mean everything, even the, quote, the bad things. Because if you look at the negative things that come to you, you will find that there is some seed of guidance, of lesson, of teaching for us to grow spiritually. And I would say that I think for those who have given their lives to God completely, whether again householder or renunciate, they have found, as I have seen over the years, that even the most negative experiences in one's life, if you start to look behind it for the hand of God, you will start to see the hand of God guiding you in a particular direction. And sometimes that hand, just like the hand of a parent who has to push us out of the way of a car that's about to run the child over, can seem a little hard or sudden or harsh. In the end, it's really helping us in a particular direction in a very particular way. So the most practical thing is to introspect. As a monastic, the most practical thing of all is to serve. Serve others, serve a wider society. See your opportunity to be an outward renunciate or a monastic. See it as an opportunity not only for more sadhana, and actually I would say even see it less for that, see it more as an opportunity to share with all the world the blessings that you get in your sadhana. And you'll find that when you start to experience deeper meditations, you will find that at a certain time, at a certain point, unless you start to share what you receive with others, and I don't mean necessarily being a spiritual teacher, it can very simply mean sharing the joy with others and uplifting them through your presence, offering a helping hand or a smile to someone. You'll find that unless you start to share what you have received, that it starts to close off that flow of blessing to yourself if you don't share it. If you just hold it to yourself in this way of self-involvement, then the spring starts to run dry and it starts not to provide the same nourishment and the same water and the same upliftment. And so for a monastic, the most important thing is to serve others and also to have a sense of humility and to watch for spiritual pride. And this is why this book, Sadhu Beware, especially for monastics, but for everyone, but especially for a monastic, because it touches on some of the key pitfalls of pride that can come with being a monastic. And so serving others, having a reality check of being with other renunciates is really helpful. And so these are some simple ways for a monastic. For a householder, how to avoid some of the pitfalls. The main two pitfalls I've seen is one, that one starts becoming so outwardly involved that one's sadhana can start to be challenged and be difficult. And so what to do then? One, if you have the good karma, to have a spouse who is also on the spiritual path. Support each other in one's sadhana. Watch out for each other. Help, take turns with the children or different duties so that one can be meditating and the other one can be serving. So help and support each other. If you're not married yet, look for a spouse that can help you in that way, because that can be very, very, very important over the long term. The other side of that, of course, is that sadhana tends to suffer when one is raising a family. Try to see this as just a phase of one's life. Do have a sadhana. Try to hold on to it for dear life, even if it's less. Sometimes I think people have this thought that if they can only meditate for 10 or 15 minutes, it's not worth it, that they need a whole hour or it's not worth doing anything. Actually, better is just to have that strong commitment to always doing some sadhana, meditation, morning and evening, no matter how busy you are, even if it's just 5 minutes before the baby starts crying, or even 5 minutes while nursing the baby. One can be practicing a few kriyas and going within. And so you have to be very creative and very practical. When one is meditating and all of a sudden your baby is crying and your child needs something, it is not spiritual to continue meditating. It's much more spiritual to go and give and serve. And so just try to, again, as a householder, introspect, be aware that yes, this worldly involvement can start to affect one. And especially try to see your service to family, husband, wife, children, broader family. Try to see that as service to God. And you will see that if you can change the attitude, especially, then it starts to become a joyful and an even indrawing and uplifting experience, rather than one that causes more restlessness and more involvement. I would say also for raising a family, it's perhaps more important to have satsang, to be around other spiritually seeking people, to be especially even around other families that are spiritual. Really work at improving your environment of the people that you spend time with. And you'll find that it makes all these things that I've been talking about much, much easier to actually practice and put into daily application. Another question, how was your sadhana affected after transitioning from monasticism to householder path? In my case, it wasn't necessarily affected deeply because my wife and I didn't have children. And so she was a Kriya Yogi and we met at Ananda. So it wasn't a strong influence in that way. We were able to support each other. And if you have this opportunity, do meditate with your spouse and even with your family, even with your children. I know I've seen many families at Ananda that meditate together and they draw their children into their meditation room. And the children may be a little restless and fidget, and perhaps your own meditation isn't as deep, but it does start to create a stronger magnetism and energy. And so it can affect one's sadhana, but it also, I know I've gone through a couple of episodes in my life where I couldn't sit to meditate because of physical issues nearly as much, just for shorter periods of time, not nearly as much as I could at other times. And I found that I think it was, again, it was a gift from God to help me to understand that one really can, must, and should make all of one's life sadhana, not just that sitting meditation time. That one really, and it's helped me to focus greatly at times that way, to start to see God, to feel God in all my activities, to not let go of the remembrance of the divine, of the Guru, to practice every simple act of giving with more of a sense of devotional offering to the divine. And so I think this is the beautiful practice that the householder path provides, is that it does train one that the only way to hold on to that connection with the divine and the only way to not lose it is to start applying it more in activity and in daily life. So these are some simple things. It could, again, one has written entire books on this. I would again recommend these books by Swami Kriyanandaji, a renunciate order for the New Age, and Sadhu Beware, even for householders, because this inner renunciation in the end is really the key. It's not about outer renunciation. And I can say, and Swamiji very often said this, that our best spiritual teachers, acharyas at Ananda Village, spiritual leaders, he said, not just people who could talk really good at times, have been the householders. And many of them were monastics at one time. I think it's a beautiful practice that really every young man and woman, if they can, should try to live as a monastic for a year, practice brahmacharya. This is a tradition in many cultures, I think in Cambodia, in Thailand, in those places. And it's a very good way to start one's life, even if one knows that you're going to be a householder. Swamiji recommends this for people coming to Ananda Village and living here. And so it's a good opportunity to have a taste and experience of that and really develop that strong relationship with the divine before one launches into the more outer householder path. So these are all different ways that one can do it. The topic is really endless because the human situation is endless in its complexity. If you have any questions about this that I haven't answered, feel free to email me. My email address is Devarshi, Devarshi, Devarshi @anandaindia.org.